We read it this morning, Matthew 21, about no fruit. So I want us to read it again this evening because it's much the same mindset, same mentality, same topic, same concept, whatever you want to look at, theme, thought. I want us to consider this morning we was looking at religion versus relationship. This evening I want us to look at love versus legal. Look at why we do what we do opposed to just why we do it. Is there a motivation of love behind what we do? This fig tree that we read about this morning, I want us to read again as a step in of connecting it to this morning's message. It looked like it had fruit, but it had no fruit as we look at the fruit of the Spirit this morning. But in Matthew 21 and 18, now in the morning, as he returned to the city, he hungered. How when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing thereon, but leaves only, and said unto it, Let no fruit grow on thee henceforth forever. And presently the fig tree withered away, and we read the rest this morning. But it looked like it, but it didn't have none. And we commented on religion versus relationship this morning. And so this evening is love versus legal. You can just legally do something, but without the love behind it, it doesn't work. As Paul reads us to, tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, Yea, I have all these things, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. It's of no value, no point. So have to love. Think about the passage Brother Mike read to us about the roof, the four of the guys that climbed up on a roof and lowered a guy down through the roof, and he was healed. At any other point, do you think what happened if next week if someone else tried that? Well, hey, I heard last week that they took a roof off of a guy's house, which is Brother Bill sung a bit about It's So Peaceful. Things that get us riled up, how do we feel if someone tore our roof off just to drop a man through our roof to get to Christ, and he was healed? Yay, he's walking, but what about my roof? You know, would we be It's So Peaceful in the arms of the Lord? Would we be glad that someone was healed, came to the Lord, or would we worry about our roof? But the point in this was, the next week will go by. What if someone took a roof off and lowered a man down just because it happened the week before? Would that make them healed? Just because they took a roof off? Just because it was lowered down? If they did everything the exact same way, would he have been healed? In history, other than Christ making spittle on the clay, rubbing it in a man's eyes to see, you think anyone else ever tried that ever? It worked for Christ. The next week, the rumor about that came some guy going around spitting in clay and rubbing people's eyes. Well, here, maybe you'll see now. It worked for Christ, maybe it'll work for me. It's not just doing the same thing, it's doing it through the Spirit and in love. It's not just a legal, you can look right. This morning I made the statement, you can do the right thing for the wrong reason. You can do the same thing and it not be accounted as profitable to God. You can say the same thing, but without the Spirit seasoning it, it won't mean nothing. So I want us to evaluate our life's love, not just our life's actions. In Romans 10, this morning, we spoke a little bit in passing about the scribes and the Pharisees and their zeal. Paul said that he had a zeal prior to the revelation revealed to him by the Spirit of Christ, by Christ. He said he had an earnest zeal. In Romans 10, verse 1, he makes a reference, Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. Now, Paul, when you read about Paul went to the synagogues on a regular basis, as his custom was, as his habit was, as he often did. There's different phrases you'll find when you read through all the Gospels. When Paul went into a town, Paul would go to who? He'd go to the synagogue. He'd reason with them. And he had a desire for them. But by Pharisee was a disciple to who? Gentiles. He was a Pharisee. He was a disciple, or was an apostle to the Gentiles. And he went to the Gentiles, but he had a heart for the Pharisees. He fulfilled his Gentile calling as on the road to Damascus. He was given the calling by the Spirit to be the disciple, the apostle to the Gentiles. But yet he still had a heart and desire. We find here a heart and desire for Israel, that they might be saved. For I bear, verse 2, them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. For Christ is the end of the law. For righteousness is every one that believeth. So again, its actions are good if they are an example of the Spirit that's within you. What we do is a witness. It needs to be coming from the Spirit of God that dwells within you. I was thinking today while we was eating down in Pocahontas, I don't know why it crossed my mind, because we didn't have a bad waitress. But the example came to mind. Have you ever had a bad waitress? You ever had a waitress that brought you your food? They came promptly and took your order. They brought you your food and didn't drop it. It was right. They kept your drinks filled. But yet, would you still call them a bad waitress? They just showed up and left. What do you want? Fries with that? Leave. Here's your drink. Want a refill? Here's your food. Here's your one dessert. Here's your ticket. They do everything a good waitress would do, but yet with no compassion behind it. You ever seen someone that was good at their job, but you can tell they didn't like it? Kind of the same, they were good at it, they didn't like it. We can be a good Christian and not like being a Christian. We can go through the motions. And I say that very loosely. You can go through the motions and you can do the right thing. You can be a help to people. You can give them something. You can take them their dishes when their loved one dies, and you can call and check on them when they're sick. And you can go through motions and you can do what you think a good Christian would do, but there's no heart behind it. You ever had someone call and check on you? You knew they didn't care. They just felt like they should call, or someone told them to. The point is, Paul said they had a zeal unto God, but they didn't understand the God's righteousness. They didn't understand that it came from God within them. That what they did wasn't because they were good enough, but what they did was Christ in them. That here, they didn't understand that God's righteous, and they going about, verse 3, to establish their own righteousness, having not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God, their own righteousness. You can try to work your way there, and what's going to happen? You're not going to be there. You can try to work your way there, and you can try to work, and you can try to do, and you can try to set forth, and you can get up every day, and you can get a checklist of things I need to do. I need to pray for 2 hours today. What if I did this? I made a list tonight of things I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to pray for 2 hours. When we get up, I'm going to start a stopwatch. And I'm going to pray for 2 hours. If I can manage to wait that long, I'm going to pray for 2 hours. And then when my alarm goes off, I'm going to close it. Then I'm going to read my Bible for 2 hours. And I read my Bible for 2 hours. And then I'm going to start for 2 more hours. I'm going to go visit people in the hospital. I'm going to the hospital, go door to door in the hospital. I'm going to give them little tracts. I'm going to say a prayer with everybody in the hospital for 2 hours. And then I'm going for another 2 hours. I'm going to call people that haven't been in church for a while. And I'm going to invite them to church. And then 2 hours is up. I'm going down there. I've worked 8 hours today, Lord. What'd you do? Show up singing tomorrow night, and I tell you, I spent 8 hours in service to God today. But yet, you may have just said a sincere prayer for somebody because you love them, and you could go home more accepted to God than I could, right? Because it's not what you do, it's why you do it, amen? Because we have to love God. It's not legal actions we go through. Our service to God is not a recipe that we have to do certain amounts of things and mix it all together. It's not a recipe, it's a relationship that we looked at this morning. Go to Matthew 12. He departed, verse 9, Matthew 12:9, and when he was departed thence, he went into their synagogues. Behold, there was a man which he had his hand withered. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? And that they might accuse him. And he said unto them, What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if he fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. I like the flip here that Christ did with them, because they was asking him, is it lawful? Is it lawful, verse 10, to heal on the Sabbath days? And then Christ shared with them, he says, it is lawful to do well on Sabbath days. To love. You know, if you love your sheep, if your sheep falls in the ditch, you're going to get it out. You're not going to sit there and wait till dark for Monday to show up. Then you're going to get it out. You would get it out because you love the sheep. Because it's your sacrifice, because it's proper to you. And again, it's something personal to you. Therefore, you're going to do it. It is not a man more valuable than a sheep. So he said, it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Were they being legal? They were asking a legal question. And he brought it down to a relationship question of love. It's lawful to do well on the Sabbath day. Then he healed the man. But again, our lives, we better have results of the Spirit of God in our life. You can call it works if you want. You can call it evidence if you want of faith. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. You know, it's the substance of things hoped for. There better be proof that Christ is in you, but you can't do something to show that he's not there. If he's not there, he's not. If he is, it's evident. Our life for God must be a life of love and not a life of legal actions. Just as we looked at this morning, it's not a religion, it's a relationship that we're having with God. In Acts 15, Acts chapter 15, verse 1, there's a dispute about circumcision here because it's legal. The legal point of the Old Testament they were wanting to fall back to because that's what they knew, it's what they were comfortable with. There was tangible proof. So they were wanting to go back to this, and there's a dispute over this. So in Acts 15:1, and certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, Except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. And we can come up with things like that if we're not careful. I can be guilty of coming across this way if I'm not listened to intently and closely, because I say I, and I mean we, are very zealous and have a great zeal, have a desire for attendance and assembly, and we start having a bleeding heart. I hope we have a compassionate heart for those that start missing services. I hope that we have a desire to walk more closely to God. We have a desire to put off things of the flesh. There are things that we don't think you should do. Well, that could come across as we're trying to be legalistic, and we're trying to say, well, you can't do that. You have to go back. I hope that we want to teach people to have a relationship with Christ and love Christ. And by having a loving relationship with Christ, it will change your life. Amen? So that is what we're looking at. But here they're coming down to say, you have to be circumcised. And we may come down and say, you have to be at church. And you do. But in verse 2, when therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and elders about this question. And being brought on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenix and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles and they caused great joy unto all the brethren. Think about this. One of the things I've read through a whole lot. We can get so caught up in with minute things that they were thinking the Gentiles had to be circumcised. There's this great big disputation and dissension here, verse 2, about whether the Gentiles had to be circumcised or not. And there's this big thing going on, and they're just talking about it. Well, you go to Jerusalem and ask them. So they're going to Jerusalem to find out what the church of Jerusalem says and what the other apostle says. And there's this big thing going on of the Gentiles coming in. Well, they're coming in. Well, they've got to be circumcised. They're going on and on about this. Well, as they're on their way, as they pass by the churches at Phoenix and Samaria, what's their concern here about the circumcision? They're just caused great joy. They're just happy that they're coming to the Lord. They're not caught up with they circumcised with this, with that. They're not caught up in the legalistic and the semantics and the fine points. They're just happy that someone came to the Lord. Where's our joy when someone comes to the Lord? We forget sometimes. I forget sometimes. When someone comes to the Lord and is baptized, they don't come out of the water no more perfect than I am. They don't come out of the water all of a sudden, just everything's washed away, and they're great people. They still have a lot of growing and learning to do, amen? Yet when they come out of the water and the next week goes by, they're struggling with the flesh and the lifestyle they used to live in. We can start kicking them, can't we? We shouldn't do that no more, and we shouldn't be that way. We should love them and try to help them. Here, there's great joy in these churches that the Gentiles are coming in. But we're going to keep reading. That's just a bonus note for this, our story. And when they were come to Jerusalem, because they go all the way to make it to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and elders, and they declared all things that God had done with them. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. This was a great problem, a great discussion, a great issue going on today. Do we have a concern for whether someone is circumcised or not when they come into the body? We don't think about that. I've heard lots of discussions. I've never heard this one myself. And I'm sure it's happened, but I've never been a part of it. We've gone beyond thinking they have to be circumcised, but yet we still can come into other legalistic things. We need to have a loving relationship with God. Amen? That's what we need to be teaching people to have, a loving relationship with God. Having a loving relationship with God will change their life. We need to stop trying to change their life, hoping that they have a relationship with God. Teach them to have a loving relationship with God, and let God be the one to change their life. Show them the Scriptures, live the example, but be patient with them. Another thing we must be with them, Galatians 5. We read it this morning. The fruit of the Spirit is love, is joy, is peace. And I'm not there yet, but who knows what the fourth one is? I've heard a couple. I'll hear some more say it. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering. How long-suffering are we with each other? When they come to the Lord, when we come to the Lord, when we're struggling with the flesh, when we're not living a perfect life, when we forget that others maybe not have served the Lord as long as we have, when they've not been down the same roads we not been, when they've not learned the same lessons as we've learned, sometimes the things that I am so zealous about, because I've been beaten around so much about, I've learned some lessons the hard way, haven't you? I'm sure we all have. We all have learned some hard lessons. Now, when you see someone starting down that path, we should advise them. Brother, when you see a brother overtaking the fault, use the Scripture, restore such one in the spirit of meekness. Don't forget that part of it. Because don't be legalistic about, you messed up. Be loving, be meek about it. Verse 22 of Galatians 5. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. Against such there is no law. They that are Christ have crucified the flesh with the affections and lust. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. Now, I'm not saying when you come to the Lord you can do whatever you want, because that is not the case. There is a lifestyle change that will happen when someone has a loving relationship with the Lord. And it's something that as a body we should edify one another to walk. We should encourage one another to walk. When we see someone slipping and struggling, we need to help them with that. Not saying just blow someone off, oh well, he'll learn not to do that. We need to help one another. But as we help one another, let's focus more on the love of Christ from us and from them than about whatever legalistic problem we're trying to fix in their life. Because if I fix a legalistic problem in someone's life, that doesn't necessarily make them love the Lord, does it? If I browbeat someone to the point of they have to be here every service, or I'm going to call them and chase them down and be there, they can show up, yet without a desire to be here. I can browbeat someone to leave alcohol alone, and they still don't necessarily love God. I can browbeat someone to not curse, or to not cheat, or to not lie, or go through the whole thing, whatever it is. You can just legalistically put your thumb on top of someone, and you can force them to stop doing or start doing some things if you put enough effort into it. But making someone legalistically do something doesn't make them love the Lord, does it? But teaching someone to love the Lord will make them do the things that's pleasing on the side of God. Amen? A relationship with God must be a loving one. So let's don't be religious about what we do. Let's have a relationship with God. Let's don't be legalistic about what we do. Let's be loving towards God and one another. As we prepare for a verse of a song this evening, as I said, much the same theme and continuation from this morning. Love, not legal. Relationship, not religious. Let's have a sincere, truthful experience with God, and it will change our lives. As we stand and sing one number.
275. 275.
Thankful this evening for everyone's attendance. It's always an encouragement to me to see you here, knowing that you desire and want to be here. Love is what's encouraging one another. But I pray we pay attention to everything we do, and everything is because we love the Lord and one another. Not because we feel like we have to, but because we want to. Any prayer, question, or announcements anybody may have? It's been discussed by some. I believe in pretty much agreement by those that have talked about it. Next Sunday is on the calendar our dinner, but with it following Thanksgiving and everyone's going to be so full and tired and families still around, we're pushing it back a week. Was that what I understood? Or was we gonna postpone it or push it back a week? Which one? Usually we end up canceling.
3 months.
Yeah. Usually we end up canceling, November and December's. In my memory, of course my memory could be wrong, but I remember missing the
What do you
food.
think?
Oh, I don't think, yeah, I think it's a great idea to cancel it,
Cancel's fine, I mean, cancel would be great, and then going into, to discuss it now, going into December, since it's going to be push it back to New Year's Eve. What's everyone's thoughts about New Year's Eve, instead of having lunch, have a meal after evening service and then just stay? So, we always have our New Year's Eve get together, so we can, Sunday morning, show up, do one whole thing, go home, nap, do whatever.
On Sunday this year.
New Year's Eve is on Sunday this year.
yeah, Christmas Eve, right?
So New Year's Eve, just have normal Sunday morning service, go home, and then come back Sunday evening such as this, and then after Sunday evening, everybody bring your meals and stuff, and we just have our big meals after Sunday evening service, and then just stay here and play games and music and fellowship. Is that a agreeable idea? Some are not even. Any opposed? So, canceling November's dinner and pushing December's back to New Year's Eve evening. Pardon? Oh, okay, we're not moving it, it is New Year's Eve. So be it.
It is.
All right.
And it sure didn't fifth Sunday.
The problem,
But anyway, we're gonna have it on New Year's Eve.
So our fellowship dinner, we're not having a fellowship dinner in November, correct? December's fellowship dinner is going to be New Year's Eve after evening service.
I was trying to make a note.
Melissa, get that rolled down, okay?
He's paper and pencil night.
And that's better than getting angel wings. Any other
Hey, you've heard of
prayer requests or announcements? And if not, tomorrow is still our singing Coney Home night, right? It's the fifth Sunday.
It's the 5th Sunday.
It's the fifth Sunday.
So,
Any other prayer requests or announcements? They're looking for us. We'll be there tomorrow night. Those prayer requests are heard, lift brethren upon our hearts, but those assistant prayer requests.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you thanking thee for the many blessings that you've given us. Thank you for this day and the blessings in it, for the services we've had today. Most of all, we thank you for Jesus and for the love that you've shown towards us, and you've given us a way of salvation, a way of eternal life. Just ask that you fill us with your spirit and your love, that we might show this to others, and the free gift might be accepted of all. Just ask you just to forgive us of our sins and our shortcomings, and just strengthen us, and we might walk in your ways. With all who are due to pray for, all sick, and all that have problems, whatever they might be, you might handle by your power and your wisdom. Go with us and keep us in your hand. Pray which we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.